Next Sunday we'll take an offering for Brother Ellis, so to pray about what the Lord would have you to give. I want to look at the same Psalms we looked at earlier, so we'll begin with Psalm 42. And read the first two verses. As the heart panteth after the water brooks, so panteth my soul after thee, O God. My soul thirsteth for God, for the living God. When shall I come and appear before God? Psalm 63, we read verses 1 and 2. This time we'll read verse 1 and verse 8. O God, thou art my God. Early will I seek thee. My soul thirsteth for thee. My flesh longeth for thee in a dry and thirsty land where no water is. Verse 8. My soul followeth hard after thee. Thy right hand upholdeth thee. Psalm 73, verse 25. Whom have I in heaven but thee? And there is none upon earth that I desire beside thee. Psalm 143 and verse 6. I stretch forth my hands unto thee. My soul thirsteth after thee as a thirsty land. Selah. Again, these are the words of an unknown author in Psalm 42. Also of David in Psalm 63 and 143, and of Asaph in Psalm 73. So these words are penned at different times, under different circumstances, by different men, but the same sentiment is conveyed in each. A sentiment in which we ought to be able to identify. What we see here is an expression of a desire for God, and that leads to the next thing, a pursuit after God. All of this requires a heart for God, which we've already spoken of. It's a heart and life in moving in the direction of God. And what we read here ought to be a defining characteristic of our lives. So our subject this afternoon is a desire for and a pursuit after God. A desire for and a pursuit after God. I want to first consider some points leading to this desire, this pursuit. Some things that are necessary if we're truly going to have a desire and a pursuit for God. And we'll take these from Psalm 63. And again, these are necessary for a consistent desire and pursuit of God. We're not interested in the occasional, but a persistent, consistent desire and pursuit. And these things must be deeply ingrained in our hearts. So we're not merely talking about emotions. We're talking about something that is deeply ingrained within, something that defines us. First of all, there has to be a recognition of and a felt attachment to God. Psalm 63, verse 1, he says, O God, thou art my God. Again, the word "oh," an interjection that simply expresses strong emotion. It is a word that sets the tone of the 63rd Psalm. So what is expressed here in the 63rd Psalm is an ingrained feeling. It's a force in the psalmist's life, something he could not get away from. The reason for this emotion is what follows the word "oh." And it is, God, thou art my God. In those words, there is a knowledge of God. There is an acceptance of God. There is a realization of God. There's a consciousness of God. There is a gratitude for who God is and what God is. This is foundational. O God, thou art continually, ongoing, my God. So he sees the relevance of God in his own life, in his own circumstances. My God. With those words, he's recognizing that he is a recipient of God's grace. He is a recipient of God's mercy. And that leads to a feeling or a felt attachment to God. My God. So there's an attachment to the Lord. We're not going to feel a desire for God, and we're certainly not going to pursue Him if there's not a felt attachment. Secondly, there was a personal awareness of the emptiness of the world. We see in verse 1, he's in a dry and thirsty land where no water is. Now, that's descriptive of the literal place where David was at this time. But of course, it's also an apt description of the world in which we live, even in its best times. So this is the deep-seated realization, awareness, that this world is spiritually parched, spiritually withered, empty, spiritually. It is the deeply ingrained realization and awareness that this world does not possess, nor can it produce what I need spiritually. It does not meet my spiritual needs. So there is this realization and awareness that the world is empty of spirituality. Though this world does not have, and though it does not produce what we need spiritually, we have a God who can. And that's what his mind is upon. But again, he realizes the world is empty. So there's no need to pursue the world. There's no need to desire it. It does not have what I need spiritually. And there has to be a consistent awareness of the spiritual emptiness of the world. Thirdly, there was a personal conviction concerning the excellency of God. We see this in verse 3. Because thy loving kindness is better than life. This is a firm conviction. God is continually always better than. We have to know that. If we're going to have a desire for God, if we're going to have a consistent pursuit of God, we have to have the firm conviction that God is always better than. Doesn't matter what you put after than. That doesn't matter. God is better than. That means that God is more suitable. God is more useful. God is more valuable. Again, put whatever you want on the other side of than. It doesn't matter. God is more beneficial than anything else in life. This has to be so. We have to believe this if we're going to have a consistent desire and pursuit of God. People get off track because they think something over here is more beneficial than God. But it never is. God is better than life. Better than life. So, there's the recognition of who God is, that He is the best, and that feeds a desire for God. If you believe that something is the best, this is the best, the very best, you have a desire for it, and you might pursue it. So if you really believe God is the best, then that's what you desire. Desire God. Fourthly, there's a personal determination for God. Where there is personal knowledge of who and what God is, where there is personal conviction that the world is a spiritually empty place, and where there is the personal conviction that God is better than anything in this life, there will be a personal determination for God. A personal determination in the direction of God. He states such in verse 3. He says, "My lips shall praise Thee." There was also a personal determination to glorify, honor, and exalt God. He says in verse 4 and 5, "Thus will I bless Thee while I live. I will lift up my hands in Thy name. My soul shall be satisfied with the marrow and fatness, and my mouth shall praise Thee with joyful lips." And in verse 7 he says, "Will I rejoice?" So you see, all of this speaks of a determination in the direction of God. And this is based upon a past experience of God. He says in verse 7, "Because Thou hast been my help." I have experienced God has my help. Therefore, in the shadow of Thy wings will I rejoice. So, his belief in who God is changes the entire mood of the psalm. And now everything moves in the direction of God. Fifthly, there's a personal faith in the sufficiency of God. Verse 5, "My soul shall be satisfied, as with marrow and fatness." He believes that the world is a spiritually empty place. A place void of the spiritual, of what I need spiritually. But he believes that God has everything he needs. Do we believe that? We can answer that question by the degree of our desire for God. The degree of our pursuit of God. So he says, "My soul shall be satisfied as with marrow and fatness." That is, my innermost being shall be fulfilled and content as one feeding on the best that there is, which of course is God. So these are the words of someone who is firmly persuaded that everything I need is in God. He's firmly persuaded of that. It is a faith that further fuels the determination for God. And this becomes a foundation of a pursuit of God. If we are going to live in verse 8, my soul followeth hard after thee, we have to believe that in God is all sufficiency, everything I need. Then notice sixthly, there's a personal mindfulness of God. Verse 6, when I remember thee upon my bed and meditate on thee in the night watches. When I remember thee, when I meditate upon thee. These are the words of someone who is enamored with God. Notice verse 6, and meditate on thee in the night watches. It's someone who deliberately thought upon God. He deliberately thought upon God. If you meditate upon something, that's something you do deliberately. A thought can pass through your mind, and that's not necessarily deliberate. But if you meditate upon something, that's deliberate. That's something you have chosen to do. And he is deliberately thinking upon God. He's deliberately mindful of God. From verse 7, we conclude that one of the things that he meditated upon was how that God had intervened in his life, because thou hast been my help. So he meditated upon God in his life. Again, all of these are foundational if we're going to have a delight in God. You can't just say today, okay, starting in another hour, I'm going to delight in God. It won't happen. These things have to be in order. It just isn't something that you just decide to do. It's a part of us because of these other things. So let's consider this desire for God, this pursuit of God. The desire is described in Psalm 73, verse 25. There is none upon earth that I desire beside thee. It's an overriding desire. That verse doesn't mean that he doesn't have other desires. It means that his desire for God is an overriding desire. It overrides all other desires. So it's an overriding desire. And notice what he says here in verse 25 of Psalm 73. Whom have I in heaven but thee? There is none upon earth. So if I look to heaven, if I look to earth, and all that's in between, he says there's none that I desire beside thee. In heaven or in earth. None. So this is an overriding desire. Now in the other Psalms that we've referred to, this desire is described by a thirst. In Psalm 42 verse 2, he said, my soul thirsteth for God. Psalm 63:1, Psalm 143:6, my soul thirsteth for thee. So it's described by the word thirst. What is thirst? Well, thirst is a felt need. A felt need. It is something that you feel. You need liquid. You're thirsty. You're dry. It is a felt need. So when he says, I thirst for God, he is saying that he feels God has his need. I thirst for God. So there is a felt need of God. Notice, thirsteth for God. Not thirsteth for what God can give, but thirsteth for God. Thirsteth for thee. Again, not merely what God can give. And we need to examine that sometimes. Am I just thirsty for what God can give? Or am I thirsty for God Himself? Am I just thirsty for the blessings that God can bestow? Or am I thirsty for God Himself? This is a thirst for God Himself. Now notice also this thirst is personal. My soul thirsteth for thee. It's personal. It is a personal felt need of God. That is, it has personal bearing. It has personal impact. A felt need of God. This thirst has depth. He says, my soul thirsteth. That speaks of the degree of the thirst. It speaks of the magnitude. It speaks of the intensity of the thirst. My soul thirsteth. This is beyond a normal thirst. My soul thirsteth. This is a thirst that the world cannot quench. My soul thirsteth. It's his inner being. It's a force within. It's a thirst within. In other words, this yearning, this craving, it's within me. It's within my soul. It's a fundamental quality of my life, the psalmist is saying. I thirst for thee. Now, there are parallels between physical and spiritual thirst. Physically, when you get hungry and thirsty, or physically you get hungry and thirsty every day. Every day. You don't have to work it up. It happens. I'm hungry. I'm thirsty. It's not something you have to work up. It just happens. It's part of physical life. That ought to be so spiritually. It ought to just happen. I'm thirsty for God. I'm hungry for God. Just as it is natural to our physical life, it is normal for the spiritual life. It is a normality of spiritual life. The thirst. The thirst for God. Psalm 143:6, he said, my soul thirsteth for thee as a thirsty land. And no doubt, David had seen and he had walked in the dry, sandy soil of the desert, and he had seen it rain on the dry land, and he saw how that land just soaked up the rain. And he says, that's how my thirst is. It's just like that dry soil soaking up. So he says in Psalm 143, my soul, I stretch forth my hands unto thee, my soul thirsteth after thee as a thirsty land. So it is a picture of one who is longing to soak up God, to take God in, for God to consume him. That ought to be our desire. It ought to be natural. It's a normality in spiritual life. This thirst is described in Psalm 42, if we go back there. Psalm 42, verse 1. It's described as a panting. That's beyond normal thirst, a panting. This speaks of a labor, speaks of an eagerness. There's a sense of urgency. It is as the hart or the deer, or an animal in the deer family, panteth after the water brooks, so panteth my soul after thee, O God. Now that thirsty deer has an appetite for the water brooks. That thirsty deer has a preference for the water brooks. That thirsty deer has an attraction for the water brooks. It is inclined toward the water brooks. And the psalmist says, so panteth my soul after thee, O God. The water brooks has the deer's attention, has the deer's focus. So thirsteth my soul after thee, O God. So panteth my soul after thee, O God. Again, the innermost part of his being. This desire is also described as a longing. Psalm 63:1, my soul longeth for thee. And this is illustrated in Psalm 143, verse 6, I stretch forth my hands unto thee. There's a longing. There's a longing for God. So in these Psalms, we see a passion for God. It's not merely liking and enjoying church and songs and the fellowship. We enjoy those things. This is something more than that. This is a passionate desire for God. Because the truth is, we can enjoy church, we can enjoy the songs, and we can enjoy the fellowship as a part of our heritage, as a part of our upbringing. That's what we've always done. So we enjoy it. But you can do that without any passion for God whatsoever. You can come to church every time the doors are open and not have a passion for God. You can sing the songs and not have a passion for God. I believe it happens all the time. But what we're reading here is a passion for God. A passion for God. You can serve God without a passion for God. You can do the work of God without a passion and thirst for God. So we need to ask ourselves, do we possess a thirst, a hunger for God Himself? Not just what He can give us, but do we have a thirst for God? So this desire, this is what we mean by a desire for God. Well, this leads to the pursuit being described. Psalm 42, we see that it's because of thirst that the deer moves in the direction of the water brooks. If that deer's not thirsty, he's not going to move in that direction. But it's because of thirst that the deer moves in the direction of the water brooks. And the psalmist says, "So panteth my soul after thee, O God." He's moving in the direction of God. Just as that deer runs after the water brooks, the psalmist declares, "So panteth my soul after thee. After thee, O God." There's an eagerness for God. That deer is working its way toward the water brooks. Why? Because it's thirsty. "So panteth my soul after thee, O God." So you see, we need the thirst first. That comes first. And then there's this pursuit of what we thirst for. The aspiration of that deer was the water brooks. "So panteth my soul after thee, O God." So again, personal examination. In what direction am I going? And whatever that is, that defines what I'm truly thirsty for. Am I moving in the direction of God? What are you running after? What is it that you are most eager for? What is it that you are working toward? What is your aspiration? The answer to all of those questions should be God. Moving in the direction of God. Working toward God. Our aspiration ought to be God. If you get thirsty enough, you have a single-minded pursuit of that which will quench that thirst. In this case, it's the water brooks for the deer. But for the psalmist, "So panteth my soul after thee, O God." You see, the water brooks, because of the intensity of the thirst, is not just a part of life, it now is life. It becomes your very purpose in life. And that ought to be God in our lives. That deer was earnest, fervent, zealous, eager, passionately striving for the water brooks. And David says, "So panteth my soul after thee, O God." He also says, early, Psalm 63:1, "Early will I seek thee." It's a priority. It's a priority. Early will I seek thee. Verse 8, he says, "My soul," again, my innermost being, "followeth hard after thee." So there's a direct correlation now between the thirst and the pursuit. And the degree, the depth, the magnitude, and the intensity of the desire determines the fervency of the pursuit. So it all comes back to a thirst for God. So let's apply all of this to ourselves. The question for every season of our lives. Life has a lot of different seasons. The question of every season of our lives is, am I desiring God? Because whatever the season is, He's what you need. He's what you need. Is He the yearning, the hungering of our lives, regardless of the season? Is He the focus? Is He what I'm attracted to? Is He the preference? Is He the beating force? Am I pursuing God? What am I pursuing? Most people in life pursue happiness. And as I've said many times, happiness is not a pursuit. Happiness is a result. It's a result. Don't mix the two up. You will be happy if you pursue the right thing. Pursue God. Are we fervently moving in the direction of God? In every season, in every circumstance, in every event, in every occurrence, God is to be our desire. God is to be our pursuit. There will be times in life when we are greatly burdened and we feel intense pressure. What should you do? Desire God. Pursue God. That's what you should do in every situation. There's going to be times when we're faced with what looks like insurmountable problems, surrounded by difficulty, surrounded by trials and tribulations. What should we do? Desire and pursue God. Desire and pursue God. You may be in a time of uncertainty. Desire and pursue God. You may be in a battle. You may be in a struggle. You may be going up against giants at every turn. Desire and pursue God. See, what we usually desire is, in a time of trial or difficulty, is, Lord, get me out of this. But escape should not be our desire. If that's your desire, what you are now in danger, because you will look for anything that will bring about that escape. And it may not be the right thing. You just need to desire God and pursue God. You may be in a time of immovable obstacles. Desire and pursue God. Your chief desire shouldn't be the removal of the obstacle. Again, if that's your chief desire, you're in trouble, because now you're going to seek whatever you think is going to remove that obstacle. And 9 times out of 10, instead of removing the obstacle, you've just replaced it or added to it. Desire and pursue God. In the midst of chaos, when you don't know what to do, you know what to do. Desire and pursue God. You can't go wrong. In times of distress and anxiety and confusion, desire and pursue God. Might be a time of suffering. Desire and pursue God. Relief is not the main thing to desire. Might be a time of sorrow. Might be a time of heartache. Desire and pursue God. You might be in a time of almost unbearable temptation. Desire and pursue God. You might be in an empty place. An apparent forsaken place. Desire and pursue God. You might be in a desert. You might be in darkness. You might be in the furnace. desire, and pursue God. But if we examine it, many, many times, it's not God that we desire. It's escape. It's escape. It's relief. That opens all kinds of dangerous possibilities. Time of fear. Desire and pursue God. Faced with decisions. Desire and pursue God. Doesn't matter what the season is. It doesn't matter what the circumstances. The season and the circumstance is not the issue. The issue is, what do I desire? And what I desire, that's what I'm going to pursue. We ought to desire and pursue God. You find yourself under the convicting power of God. God intervenes in your life, interrupts your life, and convicts you of something. You need to stop such and such, or you need to start such and such. What do you do in that time? Desire and pursue God. Desire and pursue God. You may be experiencing a season of blessing. Everything's going great. Couldn't be better. Everything looks bright. Desire and pursue God. Desire and pursue God. You might be experiencing personal revival. You might be experiencing great peace and great joy. You want to stay there? Desire and pursue God. Desire and pursue God. Whatever the situation, there is a great need for a thirsting, panting soul pursuing God. When we worship, God is to be our desire and pursuit. The truth is, if He isn't, we're not worshiping. I believe there'll come a day when we will find out that most of our worship was not worship at all. What do we desire when we worship? What are we pursuing? It ought to be God. That's what worship is. If it's anything else, it's not worship. In all our worship, we need to desire and pursue God. When we pray, what is our desire? Well, it's whatever I'm praying for. I'm praying the Lord heal somebody or whatever. Well, that shouldn't be the chief desire. The chief desire is God. What are you pursuing in prayer? It ought to be God. So in all prayer, desire and pursue God. There's a lot of prayer. If we were to break it down, there's no desire for God in that prayer. There's a desire for what God can give, but there's no real desire for God. And if you really begin to look at it, there's a pursuit of what God can give, but there's no real pursuit of God. So in all prayer, we need to desire and pursue God. When we read God's Word, same thing. There ought to be a desire and a pursuit of God. In all of our service to God, same thing. A desire and pursuit of God. You ask some people, why do you desire? Why do you enjoy serving God? Why do you enjoy doing this in the church or that? Well, it makes me feel good. Well, that's not good. I'm not saying it's not good that it doesn't make you feel good, but that shouldn't be the reason you do it. It ought to be for God. If you do something just because it makes you feel good, isn't that self-centered? It's certainly not God-centered. It ought to be because it pleases God. Pursuing God. Because God may call upon, if you just do what you enjoy, God might call upon you to do something that's not so enjoyable. There's a lot of things in the service of God that are not enjoyable. But if we're desiring and pursuing God, it becomes enjoyable. God is to be our desire. He is to be our pursuit. It's an outside, the desire is an outside power working upon us for God. And this desire and pursuit of God is beyond our power to create. You cannot create a desire in anyone else for God. And you cannot create within yourself a desire for God. This desire and this pursuit of God comes about from God Himself. So we need to pray that the Lord give us a desire for Him. Every day we ought to pray, Lord, give me a desire for you. Well, I already have a desire for God. Then, Lord, give me a greater desire for you. It's a desire that ought to be increasing. And if the desire is increasing, the pursuit is increasing. And we just continue to move in the direction of God. And moving in the direction of God will not get you in trouble. It will not ruin your life. You get off that path, now you're headed for ruin. But as long as you are pursuing and moving in the direction of God, you cannot ruin your life. It's not possible. There have been many lives ruined. Lives of saved people. But they didn't get there by pursuing God. They had another pursuit. Because their chief desire was something other than God. How many times people defending their unfaithfulness, defending their decision to go away from God, will say, but you don't understand. I had to because of this. No, you didn't. You see, the reason you thought you had to was because you were desiring the wrong thing. You were desiring escape, and in order to escape, I had to do this. That may be so. In order to escape, you had to do this. But again, escape should not be your main desire. And you wouldn't have had to leave God. You never have to leave God. You never have to move away from God. You just keep desiring and pursuing God. You just can't go wrong if you do that. But again, it begins with the desire. It begins with the desire. If I get deathly ill, I want relief. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with praying that God give relief. But that can't be my number one desire. Can't be. Because if it is, then I'm going to pursue the wrong thing. So God help us. God give us a desire for Him. For Him. And our life will be so much better. Brother Dave, if you'd come and lead us in a verse of song.